Well, welcome back. Today we are going to cover following the dollars in terms of the adoption industry. We already covered the foster care and as well as who's counting and some statistics in terms of adoption. So, Lori Carangelo starts off with a quote, "Washington is like a strip club. You've got people tossing dollars and people doing the dance. Mike Huckabee, a former Fox News political commentary show. Following the dollars. The dollar amount allowed under the law changes each year, and it is currently set at $14,600 per child for 2021. That's up $300 from last year, or from 2020. The tax credit begins to phase out those families whose modified adjusted gross income for the applicable tax year is in excess of $216,660 and is completely phased out for families with a modified adjusted gross income of $256,660 or more. These income numbers are increasing each year as well. No tax credit benefit is allowed for families with modified adjusted gross income level above that for this year. The adoption of a quote-unquote special needs child qualifiers for the full tax credit amount for each child without having to show the payment of any cost or expense. This tax credit is most often allowed in the year the adoption is finalized. Put in terms of total expense to subsidize adoptions, the 2019 projected federal expense to subsidize adoptions in 2020 was $3.063 billion, an increase from the $2.861 billion in 2018 for the 496,000 already existing adopted children, and that's according to the Child Welfare League of America, CWLA 2019. Adoption had cost the American people at least $33.35 billion, not just the $1.4 billion value already placed on adoption services in the year 2000. And that's according to the Market Data Enterprise posted in the PR Newswire in 2000. Subsidizing children adopted from foster care costs 40% less per child than subsidized foster care placement, claimed by Adoption Advocate newsletter of National Council for Adoption (NCFA), Organization of Christian Pro-Sealed Records Adoption Agencies. Adoption placement may seem to be playing out God, but too often it's about the money. Spending for adoption is now out of control. That was predicted by PR News back on August 21st, 2000, when it reported that the high-touted increase in adoptions of foster children announced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services (DHHS) actually masked the failure of new federal adoption law. The average annual increase in foster care adoptions and passage of the so-called Adoption and Safe Families Act (ASFA) equals fewer than 1.1% of the total number of children in foster care on any given day. But since 1985, foster care population has increased by an average of 5% per year. The number of children in foster care right now is the highest it's ever been. As it encouraged adoption, ASFA made it easier than ever to take children from their parents just because those parents are poor. This is according to Richard Wexler, Executive director for the National Coalition of Child Protection Reform. The American national practice of strange adoptions under non-uniform state-sealed adoption record laws and policies is not only mired in politics and greed, but also bears all the earmarks of failed breeding experiment known as euthanetics, often masked by economic rhetoric such as immigration steal our jobs or flawed crime statistics they rape to bring drugs in. One of the early examples of euthanetics in 1939 in Germany was when Aryan mothers known as the Führer brides were encouraged to become pregnant as part of Hitler's selective breeding plan, at a time when, in the 1940s and 1950s, the unwed mothers in America was systematically pressured to permanently relinquish their babies to the state of an alleged better life through adoption, a better life that no agency can predict nor guarantee, many of whom were never adopted, instead grew up in foster care. So there was a glut of government-supported children in the foster care system. In the 1960s, 72% of all adults over age 18 in the United States were married. Today, only 51% are married. Source: Census analysis by Pew Research. The children are being taken as economic orphans. As divorce rates rose in the 1970s and 1980s and single parenthood lost its stigma, generally fewer women succumbed to the societal pressure to surrender their children, so the number of babies surrendered in the US and Canada began falling while consumer demand rose dramatically. This was partly because the women who had postponed motherhood for careers were now finding themselves infertile, and the numbers continued to grow after the year 2000. For every newborn available, there were almost 40 potential adopters searching. And that's according for Making Time for Baby, 2000, posted in 2002, and the Love for Sale Adoptive Families magazine. The concept of surrendering a child to an alleged better life is still a common theme in promoting family separation instead of family preservation. In the landmark U.S. Supreme Court case known in media as the Baby Jessica case, prospective adopters, the DeBoers, ignored court orders for 2 years to return the child across state lines when the parents, the Schmidts, wanted their baby back. One Supreme Court justice issued the following opinion: neither Iowa law nor Michigan law nor federal law authorizes unrelated persons to retain custody of a child whose natural parents have not been found to be unfit, simply because they may be better able to provide for their future and their education. And that's according to Justice John Paul Stevens, and he said that in July 26, 1999. There have been cases, particularly those orchestrated by baby brokers such as attorney David Keene Leavitt of Beverly Hills, where single mothers were solicited by Leavitt to travel to California and arrange to give birth and relinquish their babies for sealed adoption in Canada, a tactic to circumvent U.S. fathers wishing to establish parental rights and obtain or share custody. And that's according to Karen Stabner, who wrote The Baby Brokers for the Los Angeles Times in 1988. At the time, the Federal Parenting Kidnap Prevention Act has been reserved for divorce custody situations, but not kidnap for adoption across state or country borders. Historically, handling of abandoned or relinquished children was left to the state, But on July 24th, 1989, Reagan's administration White House memo number 906627 administrative support for the adoption opinion put the federal government in the business of adoption and offering tax incentives and cash subsidies to people who adopt, which I think is so gross. It also paved the way in the House version of the 2001 Promoting Safe and Stable Families Amendment Act, ASFA. The primary benefactor of grant funds for this act is the National Council for Adoption, NCFA, umbrella for Christian adoption agencies. Following is a look of what taxpayers pay a welfare mom compared to a subsidized adoptive mom. In 2011, in order to qualify for state assistance, a welfare mom is not allowed to own real estate, boats, stocks, or bonds, or even a safe car worth over $1,000, and must prove that she has almost no money in the bank, just so she can collect $539 a month to support herself and 2 children, and in the process be deemed a parasite on society and be subjected to periodic home inspections, psychological evaluations, maintenance agreements, Minnesota multiphasic tests, MMPI, drug alcohol evaluation, urine screens. On the other hand, adopters who allegedly take over financial responsibilities for children they adopt as if they were born to them. Okay, sorry about that. Where were we? On the other hand, adopters who allegedly take over financial responsibilities for children they adopt them as if they were born to them, can actually collect federal subsidies until the child is 18. If the child stays in school, subsidies continue to age 21. There are also adoption tax credits, one of those loopholes Congress avoids mentioning. Yep, they can get their money back if they adopted. So the amount that they pay, well, they can get some money back, I should say. There are state-funded subsidies as well as federal funding through Title 4E of the Social Security Act. The daily rate from the state funds is the same as foster care programs, which is about $410 to $486 per month per child, unless the child can also be designated as quote-unquote special needs, which they can. Special needs under the National Adoption Association under the National Adoption Assistance Training, Resource, and Information Network, NAATRIN, a service of the North American Council on Adoptable Children, NACAC, a state subsidy profile from State Department of Social Services, DSS, for special needs may be defined as physically disability, mental disability, and emotional disturbance, which we know adopted kids have, a significant emotional tie with a former foster parent where the child has resided for 1 or more years, and separation would adversely affect the child's development if not adopted by them. But their significant emotional ties with their biological families since birth do not enter the calculation. Additional special needs designations are children 12 years or older, racial and ethnic factors, a child having siblings or half-siblings, and a special needs child may also get an additional social security check. Florida, Louisiana, and Wisconsin claimed 100% of their public adoptions were quote-unquote special needs in order to obtain funds. In part because these states can garner extra funds for special needs children, the designation has been broadened so far as to become meaningless. That's according to the State of the Children report by Boston Institute for Children. Adopters also receive Medicaid for the child, a clothing allowance, reimbursement for adoption costs such as adoption fees, court and attorney fees, costs of the adoption home study, and reasonable costs of food and lodging for the child and adopters when necessary to complete the adoption process. Under Title 20 of the Social Security Act, adopters are also entitled to post-adoption services that may be helpful in keeping the family intact, while the biological family is dismembered. Perks for adoptive families include daycare, specialized care, respite care, in-house support services such as housekeeping, personal care, counseling, and other child welfare services. While the subsidy profile states it does not include money to remodel the home to accommodate the child, subsidies can be negotiated, and remodeling could possibly be accompanied under the innovative incentives to remove barriers of adoption section. So great has been society's desire to increase adoptions. Americans even borrow to finance adoptions rather than subsidize a welfare mom and her child. Bank of America, Hebrew Free Loan Society, among others, provides secured and unsecured loans to enable adoptions. In 1990, insurance companies have been writing adoption cancellation insurance policies that cover adopters for certain expenses, have paid in the event that she or the father change their minds and revoke their relinquishment of parental rights. Foreign adoptions are now covered by some insurers. Recently, there have been extension of federal college benefits to awards adopted after age 16. There are also many books and email lists to teach adopters how to negotiate to maximize their subsidies. I actually know someone who does grants for adoptive parents, and before I came out of the fog, this was a few years ago where I felt like something was off. I mean, she's nice and all that, but like, I don't know, there's something off about the whole thing, and it just made me sick. And I said, you need to listen to adoptees, right? Like, especially me being adopted, and I felt completely ignored and unheard as usual. And now that I think about it, I'm like, ew, gross. You just want other families to be broken up so those new families can come together. Like, that's really what they're praying for. And they go out of their way to pay thousands of dollars, $20, $30, $50, $60, $70, $80,000 to have a family, which they will then likely abuse the child, whereas it would take about $5,000, so significantly less, to keep the family together. I mean, that's on average. That's what we calculated so far. But it's quite gross. Anyway, in Florida, for instance, one adopter received over $2,500 a month in subsidies for one child and plans to adopt 3 more teenagers in order to obtain 3 more large subsidies. Other costs. In 1998, the average cost of private attorney-assisted adoption had already soared $60,000. Amy Thurston, National Adoption Information Clearinghouse, NAIC, that was according to her, sorry. Multiply 10,000 tax credit per child times 50,000 adoption, and there goes another $500 billion. 41 states, a remarkable 82%, were planning on or implementing fundamental changes in the delivery of their child welfare services. Many of these systems identified privatized as a key approach to structure service delivery more efficiently. That's according to the Child Welfare League of America's government publication, Adoption and Privatized privatization and issue brief. Although privatization is not new, 80% of all adoptions in California are private or independent. The shift in allocation of service delivery responsibility is alarming, as the private sector is taking far greater role in providing, managing, and monitoring adoption planning and services traditionally provided by public agencies. In the case where children must be removed for neglect due to only economic hardship, if cash incentives currently provided to adopters were instead allocated to helping families who are simply disadvantaged, the Child Protection Services budget would be reduced from $12 billion to only $4 billion or less. This would create new jobs for family rehabilitation services and for families so they can be self-sufficient, thus lowering the cost, while eliminating excess social workers, administrators, lawyers, juvenile court personnel, therapists, and foster parents, and systems that are self-perpetuating. Now look, I get that there will be less jobs out there, but do we really want to harm the kids? Because to me, no. I think it's easy as let's do it. However, because the court system makes about additional $4,000 per each adoption per each child, and if there's multiple adoptions for the child, they still make that money times however many times they're adopted. To me, it's simple. Let's help the child, right? But they follow the money. They want their money, and it sucks because they don't really give a damn about the kids. You know what I'm saying? It's gross. Anyway, there's also a hidden price tag of record unemployment and homelessness, as the majority of our nation's homeless have been individuals who themselves had been warehoused in the foster care system, and increasingly those who were thought to have been quote-unquote rescued by the adoption system. The Adoption and Safe Families Act, ASFA, of 1997 continues to allow funding for family preservation and support services for no more than 15 months, as a move to speed up adoptions, and thus also put a price on every child's head by providing cash incentives to all who have any connection to the foster and adoption funding of kids through the system. CPS, social workers, family courts, lawyers, evaluators, adopters, etc. By 2011, the teen birth rate as a source of supply of adoptable newborns fell 37% since 1990, and that's according to the National Center for Health Statistics, thus increasing demand for adoptable children by married, single, heterosexual, and homosexual individuals and couples. Even now, while millions of families have lost their incomes and homes, there is still an intolerance of the poor and a preference for dismembering disadvantaged families rather than to subsidize them or to fund model programs that provide skills training and create jobs to support family preservation. Economic orphans still have parents. What is the current market for adoptable children bottoms out? More humane, individualized custody law instead of adoption is better than creating pathology in future generations of chosen children. Government has their own incentive of encouraging adoption. Even every baby surrendered by an unemployed, unsupported single mother means one less welfare recipient. But the math is all wrong, yet never questioned because the public is conditioned by organized special interests who profit from retaining status quo. As an example, media with the ultimate welfare mom, oh my god, Nadia Suleman, dubbed the Octomom, for bearing octuplets while single and unemployed. So this is according to the news story written on her in 2009. There's been quite a number of stories on her, so let's be real. Not only Suleman but also her Beverly Hills doctor, Michael Kamrava, was assailed for allowing her to be implanted with 12 embryos, even after she already had 6 children. She could not even support. Capitalizing on media attention at her every new hurdle, Suleiman, a former stripper, became the happy recipient of private charitable donations and became the poster child for the despised welfare mom, keeping her 14 children mostly at government expense. Actually, the average single welfare mom had for decades been young, white, middle class women pressured by her parents and the baby broker to surrender the newborn. That's according to Wake Up Little Susie, Pregnancy and Race Before Roe vs. Wade, a scholarly documentary by Ricky Skollinger, which was published in 1992. In the 1940s to 1960s, mothers relinquished primarily due to the social stigma of illegitimacy. Most most so-called voluntary relinquishments were and are coerced as a means of fulfilling a politically or social motivated agenda. Yeah, it's mostly coercion and manipulation. That's what people don't understand is only 98% of birth mothers go through an entire pregnancy and they want their kids. 1 to 2% don't, or feel like they maybe are not allowed to because of those circumstances. And it's really, really sad. Now, their voices are not heard well enough, and they should be, but also we're not heard enough as adoptees. And it sucks. But, these agencies are allowed to do anything they want to torture and manipulate these families, these women. Anyway, politics rather than an understanding of children's needs often dictates decisions about a child's placement. And that's according to Eileen T. Brazelton, psychiatric physician and child psychiatrist, as well as T. Barry Brazelton, MD, a psychiatrist, comments. You don't have to be perfect to be a parent. Psa Tagline by the National Adoption Recruitment Campaign in partnership with Adopt Us Kids, the Children's Bureau, and the Ad Council. The National Council for Adoption, NCFA, formerly National Committee for Adoption, was founded in 1980. It is the largest umbrella organization of Christian adoption agencies intent on Christianizing families through adoption. It is also the largest pro-sealed records lobby. NCFA was headed in 2011 by its president and CEO, Charles Chuck Johnson, a licensed social worker. NCFA gives false impression that it is a government agency and represents itself as the authoritative voice for adoption to be permanent and to all. On October 15, 2001, NCFA was awarded over $2 million in government grants from the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, to promote adoption awareness. Just over $1 million of the NCFA funding comes from public support, and not including another 50+ thousand that comes from its membership dues. Its members are nonprofit adoption agencies including Gladney Centers for Adoption and Bethany Christian Services. While both are quote-unquote nonprofit, they often have to look at their past IRS 990s to see where that money is rolling in. The Gladney Center in Texas have one main hospital group and 2 other big funds, combined with there's over $39 million declared as assets and another just over 12 million, claimed as income after expenses. That's over $50 million. Bethany Christian Services breaks it out as three main states: North Carolina, Iowa, and Michigan. With a combined income of over $3 million and assets over $1 million, seeing this huge nonprofit numbers makes it easier to comprehend how American adoption services is over a $3 million industry. It's actually 14.1. We did all the calculations prior, but yeah, it's that's way over. FYI. It behooves the agencies to fund a lobby group like NCFA that promotes their needs, causes public opinion to be swayed in the favor, and facilitates an environment beneficial for the bottom line by promoting sealed adoption. That's according to National Council for Adoption, Mother's Money, Marketing, and Madness by Claudia Corrigan, Darcy, and NCFA's Forms 990. By contrast, American Adoption Congress, AAC, and Open Records Lobby of Adoption Affected Individuals and Family Search Groups filed for their Form 990s for 39,000, just over. Bastard Nation, a pro-open records group of adult adoptees, declared only almost $3,000, while America's for Open Records, AM4, a philanthropic organization which charges no fees, does no fundraising, and assists adoptions affected individuals who volunteer assistance to other adoption affected individuals, consistently reported out-of-pocket losses. On October 17, 2000, the U.S. Congress, under Public Law 103-310, amended the Public Health Services Act to authorize specific activities pertaining to infant adoption awareness. IAA Title 12, Subtitle A. The legislation requires the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, to award grants to develop the implemented programs to train the designated staff of eligible health centers in providing adoption information and referrals to pregnant women on an equal basis with all the other courses of actions, including non-directive counseling, quote-unquote, to pregnant women. Over $9 billion per year is budgeted for infant adoption awareness training programs through grants, the greatest portion of which have gone to the National Council for Adoption. The brochure provided by the NCFA says the good news is they had trained more than 11,000 individuals. According to Nielsen Tracking Service, local television stations donated more than 778,000 worth of airtime, not counting the networks such as ABC, CNN, and Lifetime. Outdoor advertising giants Viacom and Lamar provided highway billboards. Radio stations and other media outlets are helping to say very publicly, "Thanks for considering adoption." A brochure describes how one master trainer in casework for the Gladney Center for Adoption spoke daily to a pregnant mother on the phone when her baby was born. Traveled all the way across West Texas to be with her in the time of need, using compassion and many of the counseling tools and techniques from the training to help the mother make her decision. When a mom decides that she wants to keep her child, a professional will be there to make a powerful impact. The mothers are encouraged to relinquish their newborns for economic reasons and in the best interest of the child. Concurrent with the push to increase adoptions, there was a significant decrease in state administrative grants in Medicaid, a reduction which severely impacted parents who were at risk of losing their children to a system as a result of such reductions, thus increasing the goldmine of adoptables. More than ever before in our nation's history, there has been a deliberate, organized strategy by religious right a place a, to place a bounty on the heads of children to adopt them into Christian homes instead of family preservation. In 2011, while America was still in economic crisis, grant funding already committed to NCFA could not be recouped. The figures did not include private grants nor post-adoption services such as agency counseling nor income through its Gladney Centers and Bethany Christian Services agencies. There has also been a cottage industry of private family search and reunion services, headed by adoptees, parents, and adopters, raking in as much as $60,000 a year. And that source is according to Kate Burke, admitted during a radio call-in talk show with the writer. Some work in concert with the agencies and courts as confidential intermediaries, also for a fee. While a few independent searchers and search groups such as AM4 provided search assistance free of charge or for expenses only. Adoption subsidies exempting private non-profit adoption agencies, such as taxation, also means loss of state revenues. Wendy's fast food restaurant places collection boxes in front of their cash registers for various promotions to fund the Dave Thomas Adoption Foundation, which funds the Wendy's Wonderful Kids, which partners with businesses to provide grants of $65,000 or more to adoption agencies, including Bethany Christian Services. According to the foundation's 2009 Form 990, to hire recruiters or to recruit adopters for foster kids aged 10 to 18. While the foundation's website shows 86.8% of funds going to grants, the main criticism by the grantees has been the grants are not enough to cover a recruiter's master's degree salary. In 1999, Wendy's founder Dave Thomas Adoption Foundation even partnered with the U.S. Post Office to market adoption by creating a 33-cent adoption postage stamp, which featured the phrase adopting a child, shaping a life, building a home, and creating a world. And that's according to Wendy's Foundation websites, including its 2009 Form of 990. The Dave Thomas Foundation, whose only goal is to increase the number of adoptions of hard-placed older children from foster care, offers no statistics on those adoptees' outcomes. According to the National Council for Adoption, NCFA, in their brief of amicus curiae addendum and opposium to Oregon's successful ballot measure 58, which opened records to adult adoptees in its state, the purpose of sealing adoptees' birth records is alleged: 1. To protect the parties of adoption from public scrutiny. 2. To protect the integrity of the adoptive family and prevent unsolicited or unwanted interference from others. 3. To be consented with all the other social services which hold confidentiality as a predominant principle of ethic practice. And 4. To facilitate the grieving process for biological parents by providing closure. Yet such protection and confidentiality was never an option. It has never been imposed by state law on relinquishing parents, adoptees, and adopters by state law, and there was never a guarantee of lifelong confidentiality to anyone. Obviously, NCFA didn't survey the 200,000 adoptees and parents who requested and maintained family search reunion assistance from AM4, nor the 2,000 adoption search support groups nationwide, many that had over 200,000 registrants. How is that adopters are deemed fit to parent, yet too immature to deal with the reality of the child's birth parents directly or via courts, as divorced parents must do? Study after study evidences that the parent who is grieving loss of a child never has closure. so long as the child remains lost to an unknown fate. It is much the same way that the parents of any missing child continue to grieve, not knowing the child's true fate. States across the country, often in response to the cash initiatives offered by the federal government, have been under intense pressure in recent years to move children through foster care systems into permanent houses. Indeed, the number of annual adoptions nationally almost doubled from 1995 to 2001, and New Jersey adoptions more than doubled in an even shorter time, from 1,364 in 2002 from 621 in 1998. The payments to parents willing to adopt can amount to hundreds to thousands of dollars per month per child. Once children are formally adopted, the state is no longer obligated to closely monitor their well-being, yet a greater amount is paid to the families who adopt medically fragile or psychologically troubled children, so the risk exists that families take on more than they can handle just for the additional money. This is by Leslie Kaufman. Cash incentives for adoptions seen as risk for some children, and that's posted in 2003. Have we gone too far too fast? Asked Gary Stringler, Executive Director of Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative, a private foundation in St. Louis focusing on getting children out of foster care. I worry that with all the applause going to the increasing numbers of adoptions, that we are possibly putting these young people into families not equipped or prepared to handle them. Richard Wexler, director of the National Coalition of Child Protection Reform, says that he was concerned by the new law would create a huge incentive for quick and dirty slip hood placements. And that's according to the Baby Brokers Directory, LoriCarangelo.com/babybrokers. Alright, she then continues to cover what the different types of adoptions are. And she quotes her source, but basically I'm going to summarize the next few pages. The 3 degrees of secrecy, so there's closed adoption, open, and semi-open. With closed adoptions, the records are completely sealed. There's no contact, and the law will try to tell you, or people will try to tell you, you're never allowed to legally know your bio family. With open adoptions, which is what mine was, it's not legally binding, but basically you're allowed to have contact with the child between bio family and child. They 80% close within the first year, and the next 20 tend to close within before the child turns 5. But it's not perfect, and it does not include co-parenting usually. Now, depends on the situation, but again, not legally binding. And then I've really never heard much about the semi-open, but I would assume that that's more the way that the UK handles it, where both parties, both the adoptive families and the birth family, get letters, but there's no direct contact. It goes through an agency, or it goes through the lawyer. And usually they do that here in the United States as well for the first year, and then they'll see beyond that. But there are other organizations that, it's hard. It's hard. There's so much. Oh god, sorry. I'm tired, and there's just so much here. But yeah, I mean, that's what she basically summarizes with some things. She then goes on to talk about the commercialization of adoption, when it comes to things like Cabbage Patch Kids and, Adopt Us Kids or Adopt a Pet or Adopt a Highway programs, which I feel like they're just trying to desensitize us to the word adoption and not really think about how harmful it is. And like, we do adopt a pet. Like, I will tell you guys, I have 3 cats. 2 were adopted and 1 is a foster care cat. And is it different in a way to humans? Yeah, but at the same time, it's really not. And often we get compared to animals, and the animals are often treated way better and have way more information. Isn't that the sad thing? That's the sad thing to me. Anywho, that is the end of this chapter. I do hope you pick up the book. There is more good information in here that you may want to know. There are tons of sources in here as well. I'm going to try to cover as many as I can gain access to read for you guys over the next, year or so. But let me know what your thoughts are. How are you guys feeling about this? The more I read, the more disgusted I get, to be honest with you. But it is what it is. And I hope to see you tomorrow for our next reading.